well, the rear end is done. The housing has been cleaned and painted. The brake backing pads have been stripped and painted, and I got it all back together. I got it wrapped up in plastic, so I just this keeps it from getting dirty in the shop. So that's done. Cover that back up. Now we're going to move on to springs. Now, when I bought the car, one of the leaf springs was broken. So just to get the car to set level, I had to buy a spring, and I got it off eBay. So it's got the typical wrecking yard markings on it. Don't know what that means. 71 Mustang, I see that. But it's some code they have, probably some interchange code. So what we're going to do today is we're going to start disassembling the springs. I'm going to take pictures of where the leaf spring clamps go, right here. And where's the other one? Oh, the other one's down here. So this 3-per, I have a set of leaf spring clamps. I have an assortment, well, don't have an assortment of the plastic spacers that go in between, and the bolts that put the springs together, spacer bolts. And you can see that right here. Hold on. Okay. Now that somebody else is on the holding the camera, this is the little plastic spacers that go between the springs. Here, 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 and here. And then there's a new set of bolts that hold the springs together and also help locate I think this is a spring. Sometimes people use bolts in the middle of them, but the top nub right here, which is a lot larger on the new ones, help locate the spring in the shock mounting plates, and also the spring perches on the rear end housing. With some pictures taken, now I'm going to try to separate these out. And what I'll basically do is I will not bead blast them. I'll just sandblast these to smooth them up a little bit. Probably paint them a cast iron color or a graphite color, something springy, something spring. I got new bushings to go in this right here. I'll press those in. Also have new shackles for this end right here. So let's see what we can do. There's one apart. Sometimes you'll find this stuff and you'll see a little hairline crack in these. I've seen that before. So, see, these are the old ones that's come apart. These are usually in pretty good shape. No hairline cracks yet. I'll sandblast this, repaint it, put it back together. And this is a kit you can get from any supplier. And what I'm never satisfied with them. You see, they come in, they're bare metal. They tape them up, and I don't know, they must store them outside or something because they rust. So I'll bead blast these and probably paint these also. But these have different thicknesses for different places on the spring. You'll notice that's a thin space, this is a thicker space, and the one that jumped on the floor is just like that, I believe. Anyway, this goes in trash. And although I know it's fun to watch, but the next one I'm gonna do off camera. Well, we're back for little short segments on things I've done while the car is waiting to go to paint. So the car's ready for the most part. And in a couple weeks, we'll get it over to paint. But while I've sort of had nothing to do, today we're gonna talk colors. This is June 23, so this is the month of colors, so we're gonna start talking some colors. As I was cleaning up the rear springs, I took them apart. I may have told you that last time. Took them apart, sandblasted them, put them back together with new clamps, new eye bushings, and new shims between the springs, little nylon shims. Every time you see the little bump right here, that means it's got a little shim under it. I'll show you what one looks like. Okay, right here. There it is. It's you flip it upside down. Anyway, it's made to live inside that little hump there and sort of keeps the springs sliding properly. Then I put new clamps on them. The clamps come as a kit. They come with little rubber things that go under them. Right, you can see that right there. And I've bought 5 or 6 sets over the last 6-7 years, and they all come with flash rust on them. I'm sure they're probably from the factory. They were the same way. They rusted fairly quickly. But I always take and bead blast them and then paint them with something that looks like the bare metal. And in this case, it's that cast coat aluminum. It may not be dead on, but it's close enough for me. Then I put them on. Usually putting them on takes some patience, and it takes a technique that you develop. Maybe there's a machine for it. It has to be. I mean, I'm sure they didn't have a guy like me putting them on at Ford. So it involves some panel clamps, clamping them together, clamping them up, and then a dead blow hammer, knocking them over, and then actually getting the little tab in the slot, and then a whack with a hammer, and it's a done deal. And then I touch them up with some of that cast coat aluminum paint. So they'll look fine for a while. But as I was cleaning them up, I noticed on the back of them 2 yellow stripes. So that's what I put back on them. I just used some tempera paint with a foam brush, and that was about the width of the stripe. And that was almost as messy as the stripe. None of this stuff is very picturesque from factory. sometimes it's a paint dab, sometimes it's a swash, sometimes whatever. They just needed the colors. So I hit it with 2 yellow stripes like it came. So that's the springs in a nutshell. They're ready to go on the car. I have the bushings for the back. They come with the shackle kit. And then I moved on to the front springs. And the front springs were coated, and you see I'm through with them. And the colors here is red and yellow, or yellow and red. That's the colors they were. Of course, those springs are upside down. They go in the car the other way with the big pigtail in the spring saddle. But that's the colors that they were, and they were black. They were painted black. They also had a lot of undercoating on them, and the undercoating, of course, I soaked them in the parts washer, and the undercoating came right off. And underneath the undercoating was bare metal, and in some cases, the actual paint markings were underneath the undercoating. So I just hit them with some, what was I forget the name of it. It was semi-gloss black, Rust-Oleum, I think. And sanded them, cleaned them up, and then hit them with some tempera paint also, red and yellow. Not trying to be too neat, because the stripes on them were not, the paint daubs or the stripe on them was not very neat to begin with. But anyway, now we'll move on to the drive shaft. And the drive shaft was equally a mess. I mean, it had undercoating on half of it, and the other half it did not. Evidently, the part that was pointing down, they got shot with the Schutz gun, or Schultz gun, whichever it is. But it's a gun that shoots that thick crap that they call undercoating. But anyway, there wasn't any real damage to the U-joints, but you know, the U-joints are fairly inexpensive. So I replaced them both. Tried, and I think I did mimic the colors that the parts were. The end of the yoke was actually a red oxide color, and the end of the yoke for the drive shaft was actually shot of lavender. Now, I'm not sure if that was part of the manufacturing process to get the correct colors. It wasn't painted solidly. It was just sort of sprayed on. So all this stuff is painted, and it's not, this finish is not the finish for a drive shaft. It should have been bare metal. And you look out there, and you can get reproduction drive shafts from most of the popular Mustangs, and they actually, have the blued seams and the electrically welded weights on them, and it's been. I mean, it looks factory. It looks new, which I would be almost ashamed to put it underneath the car, much less get it wet. But so this is going to do for me. And in doing this, underneath the undercoating that happened to be on the drive shaft, there was paint codes, and they used this to identify the drive shaft so they could pick the right one up in a fairly quick method. There were 3 colors. In addition, on the back, there were 2 white stripes right about here. I have all the measurements written down, and I'll reproduce them, but not here. Although the stripes, which was a light blue, a lavender, and a red, I believe that's what it was. Not very neatly applied. I mean, it didn't look like the person that was doing it really cared, and they didn't. I mean, it was just a car back then. But I've always, not always, but recently in the last 5 or 6. I apply these once the car is finished, and I can put the car in neutral, not neutral, but low, and just idle the car along on jack stands, and I crawl under it. Put some cardboard to shield the transmission tunnel, and I just apply them then. The drive shaft is turning, and it applies them a lot neater than, actually a lot neater than the factory ones. I've also considered getting me a rolling fixture. that I can just set the drive shaft in and give it a spin and apply it that way. But why? I don't do that many of these cars to have that, although they haven't stopped me in the past. Anyway, so the drive shaft is done, barring the paint stripes to identify the actual length of the drive shaft for the car. I believe the white stripes on the back, and they were towards the back right about here. I believe that has something to do with the balance of it. I think that was basically telling them where to fix the weight, but I'm not sure. But there's somebody that does know, I guarantee you. Anyway, so that's where we are now. We got the suspension ready. Oh yeah, one more thing. Let me get you over here. Made last time. Set the rear end up. I got it into the housing. Set it up. Got the axles in. We had a fun time pressing out the bearings, pressing the bearings on, putting it back together. I'm going to pick up a couple of wheel cylinders today, and I'll eventually build up the rear axle so it's ready to go. There is a pinion snubber that goes right here. That is not on it right now. It's over here. I made the mistake of soaking the pinion snubber in the parts washer. And it, it's like you put some of this rubber stuff in brake fluid, and especially if it's DOT 3 or DOT 4 brake fluid. I mean, that stuff swells up like nobody's business. And this is just like Varsol, but it still swell up a little bit, and it's still kind of squishy. So I mean, there it is. Maybe it's 25% larger than it should be. Maybe not. Maybe it's getting smaller. I'm not sure. All I do know is that one of them is a reproduction one, which normally you think a rubber bumper like that would be cheap, so you just replace it. But these are like $40. I guess I would have thought better of it if I'd have known how much they were. And I did have an idea that they were a little pricey. But I guess what I didn't know is that they would swell up. Anyway, so that's set up, ready to go. I'll put it over here. I cover it up, and I'll eventually put the springs on it, coil springs, leaf springs, and the drive shaft. I'll lay it all together and cover it so that we, when it comes time to assemble the car over there, that we have everything we need at the time. And there'll still be 100 little things that you have to do. Anyway, so little jobs I'm doing right now, just not to just fill the time, but they eventually have to be done. It really saves a lot of trouble when you're building up a car. That when you need the heater box is done. Speaking of heater boxes, it's up here on the top, right there underneath the defroster plenum. It needs to be rebuilt, so I'll go through that, put a new core in it, check the motor out. We'll probably replace the motor if I can get one that looks like it, and it'll be ready to go when we're building up the car. I'll eventually get to the instrument cluster, rebuild the clock. Got a quartz kit for the clock. Rebuild the clock for the passenger side dash, and I'll get the instrument cluster rebuilt, and that'll be done. Let me see what else. The steering's done, transmission's done, drive shaft's done, brakes are done. Waiting on the car to be painted. So what else? That's it for now. I don't think we've had, although we've had some warm weather, and it's kind of warm out today. Last week I was at Carlisle on Saturday, and it was in the mid-90s. I thought I was gonna die. I wore a white shirt for reflection purposes. I also wore long sleeves so we get sunburn, but it kind of inhibited the airflow. So I should have gone short sleeve and spray on sunblock. But anyway. So it's going to get warmer, and I'm gonna find out when the hottest day of the year is, and we're gonna do upholstery that day. We'll get the white interior finished, and I'm sure the hotter the vinyl gets, the better it will go on. Anyway, not really. It's just I always like to do it in the summer because it's easier to work with. But anyway, that's where we are right now. We'll get the car to paint. I don't know how my video editor will put this together, but I do appreciate you watching.